Today we're reviewing one of the most underwhelming releases every year, at least for me, and it is the E.H. Taylor Barrel Proof. But is this year any different? Let's go find out. Welcome back to the Bourbon Retriever, where I go on the wild, hunt bourbon, and bring it back for you. And today we have the E.H. Taylor Barrel Proof Bourbon. I was lucky enough to get my hands on this year. This is a relatively hard bottle to get. Last year in the Virginia, it was a lottery bottle, but this year they put them in the random drops. Now I was searching online trying to find exactly how big these releases are. A lot of times brands will say on the back, like, this is bottle X of whatever, but I couldn't find any release numbers on this. My guess though is it's relatively low just because of how hard it is to find. The MSRP on these bottles is $79.99. However, you're probably never gonna see it for that price just because it's a Buffalo Trace juice. It's hard to get. Typically these things get marked up a little bit. I want to say the secondary on it right now is somewhere around like $250 on these bottles if you can find them. Now there's no age statement on these products. The rumor is that they're roughly blends of like 6 to 8 years old, and I would believe that based on the taste profile of these. They're much more lighter, crisper, honeyed front. They don't have those oak char notes, so that kind of goes in line with what I'm getting off the taste on these typically. In addition, for the price point, it kind of makes sense, right? You're looking at 6 to 8 years for $80 bourbon. If this didn't have the hype and crazy behind it, it's about that $10 a year price point. So that kind of it's in line for what that price would be if that age statement is right. And now the proof on these vary. This one is 127.3 proof. The batches, I think they're roughly like, I've seen them as high as like, I think 134-ish was like the first 1 or 2 releases, but most of them are in that like high 120s range. Now this is overall a relatively young product line extension from Buffalo Trace. This was originally released in 2012, and this is only batch 13, so this is only the 13th iteration of them doing this product. So E.H. Taylor is mostly known for helping get the Bottle and Bond Act passed through Congress to develop regulations on what is a bottled and bond bourbon. However, this one is not a bottle and bond bourbon, so it was a little odd to me at first that they put his name on it. However, these are pulled from warehouses that were constructed during E.H. Taylor's time at the distillery. I'm typically a little skeptical of the stories that bourbons put on the back of their bottles, but whenever they actually tie it to the namesake, it adds a little more credence to it. So I'm glad that they're actually pulling these from those warehouses. One last thing I'll say before I jump into the review of this bottle is I actually took some time to wait to do this review. I wanted there to get some air in this bottle because I've noticed when I do reviews of fresh cracks, it can be drastically different from when there gets air in it. So I like to give you impressions of what it was when I had fresh cracked it versus what it is now. However, when you wait to do reviews, oftentimes you don't become the first 2 or 3 people to put a review out, and that can hurt your numbers on the video you post. So a lot of YouTubers just get the bottle out, the review out right when they get the bottle. So if you enjoy this type of content where I'm taking longer time to put the reviews out, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. I'm gonna see how this video does and see if I should do something like this going forward. But with that, let's go ahead and get in the review. Cheers. Okay, wow, right off the bat, this is much better than prior E.H. Taylor releases. I've had the previous 3 releases and batch 5, and I thought they all were subpar. I actually prefer the E.H. Taylor small batch and single barrel over the E.H. Taylor barrel proofs because you get a lot of the same flavor notes, that nice light honey, crisp green apple. However, the E.H. Taylor barrel proof in the finish is oftentimes just ethanol and rye, high rye spice. And on the small batches and single barrels, it's a much smoother, more delicate finish where you get flavor instead of that ethanol burn. But this has the nose of a great single barrel from E.H. Taylor. It has much more of the plummy, jammy notes of the apples that you would get. There still is that honey and the green apple, but there's more of that jam, almost mulled fruit note on this that you typically don't get on the E.H. Taylors. Yeah, I'm really digging that aged fruit note. Typically on E.H. Taylor's, it's much more of a lighter, riper fruit note, whereas this one definitely is more of like a canned fruit. Yeah, off the nose, this is definitely a buy, much better than almost any other E.H. Taylor product that I've had, but let's go ahead and jump in the palate and see if it translates. Okay, I'm gonna first talk about the back half because that is typically where I just don't enjoy these bottles, and this one is much better. You still have that rye spice ethanol in the back end, but the flavor goes with it. On the tip of the tongue, you get that honey, green apple, but when it goes into the mid palate, I'm getting a fruit note that I typically don't get on E.H. Taylor's, and it is like a chocolate covered strawberry. I'm surprised to get that chocolate note because typically E.H. Taylor's don't have the char, the barrel oak that you would find like on a stag. They're just very different profiles, and they do that on purpose at Buffalo Trace. If E.H. Taylor and Stag taste the same, there's no need to have two different brands. So E.H. Taylor's are typically the lighter, fruitier notes, but if you like those oak notes, you're gonna lean much more towards like the Eagle Rares and the Stags of the world. So this batch isn't reaching the level of a Stag oak char, but there definitely is more oak in this than there is in a typical E.H. Taylor. The other note that's making this a much better pour than typical E.H. Taylor's is the creaminess. This is just a mouthful, almost like a cheesecake that you have going on your mouth. That cream cheese is just coating your whole mouth. And that's what I look for in good pours. I want viscosity, I want creamy, that is a full mouth feel and not just kind of like a watery or ethanol burn just like coating over your mouth. Yeah, that cheesecake with the strawberry, chocolate strawberry, that is exactly what I'm getting. Imagine like you have a dessert plate with a cheesecake with chocolate strawberries on top of it or cut to the side with a little bit of drizzle of honey on top of that. And this is exactly what I'm getting. Maybe some little bit of caramel in there. Yeah, I just can't get over that cream sensation. That is really thick. Going back to the finish on this again, it is not, I don't want to say lackluster. It doesn't live up to what I'm looking for though in most barrel-proof products. The lingering finish I'm getting this is mostly rye spice. There is flavor there, more than other E.H. Taylor barrel-proofs where it is just straight ethanol. There is more flavor on this one, but I would still say it's lacking compared to other products that I love a lot more. Okay, so let's jump into my final thoughts on this bottle. Is this worth the $80? Yes. If you don't have one, or even if you have a couple, this is definitely worth the $80 buy because this is the best by a mile of the E.H. Taylor barrel proofs that I have ever had. Now, is it worth the $250? Personally, not for me because I like the Stag notes more. I'd much rather go and buy a Stag for a fraction of the cost, maybe even get two of them for which you have to pay to get this, just because I like those oak notes more. However, if you are much more of a fruity, cream-filled person who likes that type of palate, this is your wheelhouse. Buy this over Stag. But if you've never had E.H. Taylor, definitely look for this batch 13 at a bar. This is definitely one to try just to know what it tastes like, how it's supposed to be. And if you're one of those people that has to have the whole vertical collection and you're looking to buy one E.H. Taylor barrel proof for that, definitely hunt the 13. This is a great pour. So that's my review of the E.H. Taylor barrel proof. If you're doing this content, before you get out, check out this video, hit the subscribe button. There's somewhere up here. And until next time, cheers.